This picture that you see right here is a picture of Dr. Zegree and myself taken in my home in December. He came over because I have a grand piano, which is, by the way, named Steve now, that I just got, and it was kind of a bucket list thing for me. And he came over, and so the last time that we had a musical experience together was then, in December, right before Christmas. And he played this piano, and it was beautiful, obviously, because it always was. And we did a few songs that we really liked. Lori was here, my wife was here. It was a very special evening. Our story begins way back in 1977 at the Fred Waring Workshop in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. And Steve was a master's student at that time at Indiana University, majoring in piano. I was an employee of Fred Waring and the Pennsylvanians, and at the time I was a clinician at the workshop, which was a choral workshop for young kids who were choristers in high school. And Dr. Zegree at that time and another young man named Tom Jaber, who is now at the Shepherd School of Music, has been the head of choral activities down there for some time in Houston. They were both apprentices, and they came and were accompanying during that workshop. During the course of that summer, Dr. Zegree and I, Steve and I, became really pretty good friends, and he convinced me somehow, and I'm not sure how, but he convinced me that I needed to be studying voice, although I was doing pretty well at that time with Fred Waring, but I also knew that I needed a career change, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do because that's all I had done. And he convinced me that I should maybe come to Indiana University and audition. He thought I had an operatic voice. Well, far be it from me to argue with Steve Zegree. So I talked to Fred Waring, and Fred made a phone call to the then Dean, Charles Webb, who is now retired, but Charles and Fred had told Charles about me. And so we arranged a time where I could come and audition for the school. Meanwhile, Steve and I drove back all night one night. He was driving. I was drinking, as I recall. I had a few beers, and I was always of the mind that you had to drink a few beers when you drove so you could face the traffic with confidence, but Steve didn't see it that way, so he drove. So anyway, we rolled in about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning in Bloomington from East Stroudsburg. And I had to sing an audition at 9 o'clock, and he played for me. And it was for the esteemed teacher and Wagnerian soprano, Margaret Harshaw. And I will never forget what she said to me. She said, I sang Danny Boy, by the way, in the key of F with a high A at 9 o'clock in the morning, kind of probably smelling like a brewery, which I think she caught whiff of. And she said, well, that was okay, but you sound like a saloon singer. Well, that didn't offend me. And I think you're a tenor, and that kind of offended me a little bit, but not much. But then she told me I sounded like Joe Feeney. And I said, that really offended me, because Joe Feeney at the time was the Irish tenor for Lawrence Welk, and, you know, the Lawrence Welk show in his band. And I thought, how dare this woman? So I said something probably really inappropriate, which I won't say now, but I offended her. And that was the beginning of our relationship, and of course she didn't want to take me as a student. So I walked out the door, and Steve came up to me and he says, you have no idea what you just did there. I said, no, I probably don't, but you know what, I just really don't care, because she was rude to me and I was rude back to her. Well, that was the beginning of but she told me that I wouldn't sing opera, that's what she said. And I went, well, I'll show her. So in essence, Steve and Margaret Harshaw both did me a great favor, because they ticked me off to the point where I decided I was going to prove them wrong. And Steve stayed with me the entire time. He was my accompanist and my friend, and that was the beginning of an almost 40-year musical relationship, which just recently ended. We did countless gigs together. We did a recording together. We hung out together. I used to beat him up playing one-on-one basketball. He thought he was pretty good. He was terrible, by the way. The only thing he was quick. But he's gone now. But I have to say that it has been one of the most profound things in my life to know that probably 30% of my musical life is gone. And I've been wrestling with that a little bit. But I know that Steve is happy because I've come to grips with it, and I'm going to continue to make music and to write and do the things that he thought were important. You know, he did a memorial, we had a memorial at Indiana University, And I wasn't going to do it. And my wife, ever so smart, said, well, what would Dr. Zegree do if it were you that was dead? And I thought, okay, fine, good. Well, he'd have been there, like he always was. And so I did sing, and I'm glad I did, because it turned out to be pretty good, and it was actually cathartic. But I miss him. We all miss him. He was one for the ages. He really was. And I'm proud to know that he was my friend for almost 40 years, my great colleague, and one hell of a human being and musician and educator. And those who knew him and had the pleasure of knowing him and the luxury of knowing him are truly fortunate indeed. And I was one of those folks. So Steve, wherever you are, thank you for all the years. I love you, brother.